What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Marketing Siege Radio, episode number 87. It's also the year I was born. What do you know? So, all right. It's a simple question I want to ask you guys today. Are you decoding the action signals that you're being given, or are you just overindulging in the emotions of the moment? You know, a lot of us have our favorite flavor of misery. For some people, it's anger, getting angry, getting frustrated. For others, it's disappointment. But for me personally, like it's worry and guilt. And today I just wanted to tell the story of what was going on. I've talked a lot about why I felt that way, but today we're going to start talking about how I actually began to win and how you can too. So, like I said, for me, it was worry and guilt. And for many years, I sat around the house, especially after I stopped teaching school. I had gone to college all that time. I was married. We were off on our own. And, I'd stopped teaching. My whole life up to that point had been in the pursuit of music, and it had come together in a way I never really wanted it to happen. So I burned that life to the ground. And before I started training in MMA, before I started doing any of that thing, like there was a summer for sure that I sat around the house and I just worried that I wasn't good enough. I was overindulging in guilt, and I knew I had all these things. I had all these advantages at my disposal, but I was refusing to be the leader that my tribe deserved. And at that time, I didn't know who they were by name, by face, nothing. But I felt them in my heart, and I knew that I would find them if I could just get out there and do it. And I knew I had everything I needed to be successful. I had an education, which we can go back and forth on the education system all day long. That's not what this topic is here about. But I've, always been labeled as a hustler. Had an incredible work ethic. And, I soak up information like a sponge, and I love it. I'm a recovering info addict. And, I knew I had information in health, wealth, and relationships that could not only change lives, but save lives. And I had the love and support of my wife, my parents, my family. I had everything to my advantage, but I wasn't moving. Despite all that advantage, nothing. I was frozen in fear that I wasn't good enough to be a leader. It was like, what made me so special? What made me so special that I could go hit the live button on Facebook and just talk to people. I had fear that I might be successful, and then people would have expectations like I was, superhuman, better than them. I'm just a human being. And I was like, I'm definitely not a superhero. At that time, I could barely take care of myself. And I was like, how can I possibly lead a movement? But that voice persisted in my head. It kept telling me, it was like, you can do things. You need to get out there and just start trying, even though I know you don't know what it is, quote unquote. So reluctantly, I began to act in the pain. Whenever any of these negative emotions would come up, worry, guilt, anxiety, I just started doing stuff. And that was the only plan I had. It was like, whether it was good, bad, ugly, didn't matter. I would just start acting in the pain for good, bad, or ugly, imperfect action. And the more I did so, the more I understood what the actual message was for each emotion. And I came to realize that negative emotions are just action signals. And I took this misunderstanding of emotions and have used that experience to actually craft a system for transforming emotion through storytelling. And I'm going to be super excited to be revealing that in the coming days. And I've always felt this thing where I had this problem where I would tell stories and I'd get to the end of it. And I'm like, oh, it felt unresolved. Like it felt like if you're like I came up in music studying music theory, is like uh there's like tonic chords, which is a really fancy word for like the name of the chord, like the main chord in the song, the main pillar with which everything is built off of musically. And then there's the dominant, which is everything that the tonic chord is not. And all music is this back and forth from tonic to dominant, tonic to dominant. Dominant wants to resolve the tonic, and tonic either kind of wants to stay the same or move to a dominant to be resolved again. So it's just like that. Transforming emotions is exactly the same thing. And the medium to do that through is stories. But as I talked about yesterday, a lot of times people don't know the outcome of a story. They don't, so oftentimes people just start with a story and they start rambling. I've done that before because they don't know what the goal or the objective is of the story. And I feel like, you have this obvious external objective, the journey of achievement, if we're going off of the Hero's 2 journey models. And you also have this journey of transformation. And that is the most misunderstood part, because people, in my experience, that tell stories that feel unresolved, it's because they're not resolving that negative emotion. So that's exactly what this system I'm creating is all about. So just think about that. A little cheat code for you right here. I talked about my favorite flavor of misery is guilt. And throughout this story, this is a little more teaching than I normally go to in just a normal podcast itself. But just to wrap this point up and put a bow on it, guilt means that you violated your own standard. And the call to action is realize that you've done that and vow to never break your own rules again in this way. So hopefully this story did that, because my rule was I'm not doing anything, even though I have advantage, I'm worthless. So I vowed not to do that again. I vowed not to let that emotion eat me up. And I vowed to feel that command come in from the voice, God, universe, whatever it is you want to call it, to take action instead of sit there and wallow in emotion. So remember, you're just one upgrade away.